Senator Austin, you're muted. So if you're right, when you're ready, let me know.
Sue, can you hear us? Can you hear us?
I can now.
Okay.
CTN was muted. Thank you.
Are we all set?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So Commissioner, you're up first, so I think we'll just dive right into this. If you just want to do an overview of the budget.
So thank you very much, Senator Austin. I know Representative Walker is not in right now. She's just stepped out. I know Senator Berthel is also not in, and Representative Nuccia, but I just want to thank you and the Appropriations Committee this morning for the opportunity to testify. I am Charlene Russell Tucker, the Commissioner of Education. I'm here with members of the team so we can answer, I know the many questions, Senator Austin, that you said you have for us. So we can do that. And certainly we'll be taking notes for things that we are not able to respond to immediately, but that we will get back to you for our subcommittee meeting. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I'm not going to take any more time in introductions. We will answer your questions. Seated to my right, though, today is Ajit Gopalakrishnan, who is our Chief Performance Officer, and right now doing double duty as our State Director for ESSER funding. And so is here as well to provide answers as we take your questions today. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. So there was a lot of changes in the governor's budget for the State Department of Education, in particular around the $150 million that was associated with education funding that the legislature had been working on for a number of years. It's actually about half what was originally intended. So I'm going to start off with two small questions relative to those line items. And mine are small because they're relatively small. One is VOAG. And our understanding is the vocational agricultural schools for this current year, are not going to reach the statutory dollar amount that, and the reason they're not going to reach the statutory dollar amount was because the numbers were inaccurate that were put into the budget last year for VOAG. Do you know why we didn't have enough money in last year's budget to meet that $5,200 per student for VOAG?
I can certainly check to find out what we placed in there, but as you know, when it is not sufficient to fund the enrollment, then it's certainly appropriated that way. So that I know is what occurred. But I can't speak right now to what we actually had put in the budget, the numbers at that time, and I can certainly go back and double check that. Of course, for the upcoming budget is to fully fund it based on the
Right,
enrollments.
and we should always have it fully funded to begin with anyways, and that was our understanding, was that in talking with some of the education committee folks, they said that the numbers were wrong that were put in. And you have the authority within the statutes to diminish that or do it within available appropriations. However, if we're not going to put the right number in, then we're setting ourselves up to begin with. So I just want to double check on that number. And my second question is relative to charter schools. And there's a lot of back and forth on the charter school numbers. My understanding is that you get grade growth and increase in numbers from charter schools. Are we, with the numbers that the governor has in the budget, are we funding all requested charter school either grade growth or numbers growth for those particular schools, and any numbers that you have gotten relative to the current charter schools that are funded?
So thank you again. The actual numbers have been placed there. The numbers in the budget represent one of our charter schools was given seats back, and then to fund the new seats that were requested for integrated day. So the budget is really looking at and addressing everything we know that is occurring in our charter school programs.
So to be clear, then we're funding every seat that we know that's a charter school seat.
That's correct.
From STEM to Stern, from the Norwich charter schools all the way down to the Stanford charter schools and anything in between.
For all the numbers that we have for the enrollments, yes, the budget supports that.
Thank you. Representative Walker.
Thank you, and good morning to your team. Great to see you all. I have two burning. Okay, I'm going to stick with what I wanted to ask for, and then if I have time, I'll come back. As you know, we're trying to figure out what is left in our ESSER funds, and we've been going over that with our local districts and trying to figure out how the money's been spent and how much money is left. Because there are many things that a lot of the boards want to do, and they've said breakfast, lunches, after school programs, et cetera. So they've made a point of talking to the legislators, but we keep going back to the ESSER funds and where are we with them and how much is left and how do they obtain them and when do they expire? A lot of parts in that. But I need to hear clearly what is left and how do we access it for our districts?
So thank you so much, Representative Walker, for us to explain that. I know there's a lot of misconception and information out there about the ESSER funding. So I'm going to turn it over to Ajit to walk us through. There's ESSER 2, what we have remaining there, and the ARP ESSER, which was the largest portion of money that we received where we are. And I'll also say, under my leadership, transparency, commitment to transparency is really important. And so we've set up within the last year or so an expenditure dashboard that is on our EdSite data portal that it updates overnight. And so literally you can go on for all our grants, including the ESSER grants online. You can pull up a district, you can see all the grants, you can see what's been paid out, and you can see the balance that's still with us. And if you go back, because we also loaded information in for previous years, you can see funds that were not utilized and came back to the state. So I just wanted to preface that and be more than happy at some point to do a workshop or something with legislators so you know how to access that information at your fingertips. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ajit to just walk us through the ESSER resources.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you.
You're on.
So as the Commissioner mentioned, we're referencing two pots of ESSER funds. The first one,
Excuse me, sir, what is your name?
sorry, Ajit Gopalakrishnan. I'm the Chief Performance Officer for the Department of
See,
Education.
I wasn't going to try it and pronounce it. It's good to see you again, G. Go ahead.
Yeah, nice to see you too. So ESSER 2 is the first one that I'll talk about. ESSER 2 came to Connecticut in 2021 And it's about $443 million that was distributed to our districts through a formula allocation. So districts were given, and we have about $2 million still left in that budget. That's about 0.5%. Let me go over the deadlines. There are a few deadlines that are key here. The first one is the obligation deadline. And by obligation, we mean a district's committed use of funds for a particular purpose that's actually reflected in their accounting system. So i.e. a PO, a purchase order that a district has cut for a particular expenditure. The obligation deadline for ESSER 2 funds was September 30th, 2023. So by that date, a district had to make a decision on what they're going to do with those funds and actually commit to that procurement through a PO or in payroll, if it's payroll to staff. If it's payroll to staff, that had to be expended by September 30th. If it is procurement through contracts and such, they had until January of 2024, January 28th of 2024, to liquidate those funds. So that's the liquidation deadline. The feds gave us the ability to request an extension to the liquidation deadline, not the obligation. They can't do that. They can only give us an ability, a longer window to spend the money that's already been committed, obligated by the districts. So that amended liquidation deadline, if we made a request to the feds, was March of 2025. So it would give our districts a longer runway to spend the money that they've already committed. And that requires federal approval. It requires the state to request information from the districts to have evidence that they've already obligated the funds by September of 2023. We send that to the feds, and then they give us an approval. We ask districts for that evidence. We got it from some districts by the deadlines we had established and that the feds established for us. We submitted that, and for some districts, we got the liquidation extension. We found later that there were some other districts that wanted a liquidation extension. We made a special request to the feds to say there are a few other districts that didn't meet our deadlines. They want to request an extension. And they said, fine, submit it. And we have just submitted that liquidation extension request for a few districts. Lastly, there are a few other districts that we have learned have actually failed to obligate their funds by the deadline of September 30th, 2023. And those districts, the obligation, the missed amount comes to a little over $1.3 million. So of the 2 million, about 1.3 was not obligated by the deadline. Unfortunately, there is nothing we can do about those funds. Those funds go back to the US Treasury.
How many schools?
The biggest amounts are in about 5 districts. A few districts have, $50, $100, $10, whatever, but the biggest amounts are in 5 districts.
They're charter schools.
Okay.
Achievement First Bridgeport Academy, Achievement First Hartford Academy, Elm City College Prep School District, Jamoke Academy, and Stanford Charter School for Excellence. Varying amounts, as Ajit mentioned, but those are the ones that at this point, nothing more can be done. Those resources must go back to the Treasury.
Go on.
Sure.
The next group.
So the next grant is the ARP-ESSER grant, right? So now that we understand, do you want to jump in? Chris?
Just the next group. So there are those 5 that nothing can be done. There are 4 of them that did get the green light for the liquidation extension. And there are 4 of them that we're waiting to hear if the feds will give us the liquidation for them.
So moving on to ARP-ESSER, this one is our biggest allocation from the feds. It is $996 million, so almost $1 billion. That is a formula grant to our districts. The obligation deadline, so the date by which districts have to commit those funds, is this September 30th, 2024. So we still have a little over 8 months, or maybe a little less than 8 months to go to actually obligate these funds. And we know And on the public dashboard that the commissioner referenced, you can go and see what is the balance for every district in the state that is still sitting with us. And roughly 10 districts across the state account for 2/3 of the balance. And the balance that's sitting with the state out of the 996 million is about 426 million. So that's roughly 43% of what's, the total 996 million is still sitting with us. Now, just to be clear, just because there's a balance sitting with us doesn't mean that the district don't have plans for these funds and haven't already obligated it. They just haven't spent it yet and made the request to us. So just want to, but this is a lot of money still sitting with us with less than 8 months to go, right? So just want to put that out there. The current liquidation deadline, the date by which they have to spend their money, is January of 2025, January 28th of 2025. The feds have just notified us that we can seek a liquidation extension like we did with ESSER 2. And if all the funds are obligated, and we know that funds are obligated, we can seek liquidation extension on behalf of those districts. And if the feds approve, then we will have until March 31st of 2026. So if there are contracts in place to upgrade facilities, or they are procuring technology, or they have a contract for tutoring services, or whatever the case might be, as long as those funds are committed by September 30th of 2024, they can be expended pending the federal approval until March of 2026. So there is still time to make sure that any balances are fully obligated. And if it's staff, payroll, and benefits, that they are expended by this September. Payroll can't go past this September, but contracts and other types of procurement can be expended past this September as long as they're committed by this September.
Thank you. I think that, I hope that explains it for everybody, because we had a lot of misinformation going around and we needed to make sure. I think that the follow-up, because I'm just going to stick with this and go, the issue is that the districts can make the choices for how they spend their money. There is no restriction on how they spend their money. Am I correct on that?
There is a lot of flexibility.
Okay, that didn't answer my question.
Well,
just pointing that out.
well, just to be clear, just to sort of say, there is a lot of flexibility.
Okay.
We established 5 sort of very broad priorities within which districts may choose to allocate their work. So, for example, in ARP-ESSER, there is a federal requirement that at least 20% needed to be devoted to learning acceleration, academic acceleration. But beyond that, there are several priorities that we have established: social mental health supports, summer enrichment, et cetera, that districts can allocate. And Representative, you mentioned like after school and so on. I mean, there are ways in which districts can use these funds. There is a lot of flexibility around this. So, Commissioner.
And just move forward. The time frame for if I submit a PO or something to you, what's the turnaround time for me to get a response back from you?
Districts aren't necessarily giving us the PO. They're sending their PO to whomever they're buying it from. But when they send us fund requests,
Right.
we are paying Representative on a weekly basis.
Okay.
And I was looking through in the last 7 weeks, we had requests from almost 140 districts for over about 93 of our grant programs. So not just ESSER, right? Every grant works this way. So districts are using the system, submitting reimbursement requests for what they have expended, and we are making payments on a weekly basis.
Okay.
Several $1 million every week that we pay.
Okay. So that ends it. But I guess the other part was the state and the districts were informed about this over a year ago about this process?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative McCarty.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner and your team. And thank you for submitting your testimony, which I'm going through. I have a couple of questions. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the LEAP program. And I noticed there's a $7 million allocation. Will that be a permanent line going forward? And then if you could just give us the status of where we are. I know it has a big success story with, and I saw at the high school level, almost 16% increase in attendance by using the LEAP. But I wanted to bring my concerns to you that, it seems that throughout the state, we're having some issues, even with the rural school districts. So I'm wondering if you could comment, is there a way that this could be expanded? And what are the areas where it's being used right now? And if you could just enlighten me a little, if there's a possibility, and going forward, those are ARPA dollars as well. So if you could just comment there. Thank
No,
you.
Absolutely, and thank you very much. We're really proud of the program, which is now a national best practice in addressing attendance, addressing chronic absence. So we currently have 14 districts that have been funded, and the current funding is ARPA dollars for the LEAP program, which we're really thrilled about. It's been evaluated. We know it's evidence-based. We know that it works. And so in the budget going forward, we're really pleased to see that the governor moved it into the general fund. So that's where it is, the $7 million that you have right now, because it shows some levels of permanence when the federal dollars go away. So we have 14 districts that's funded, doing quite well with the program. We do hope, though, have I think it's over 100 other districts that are participating in the LEAP 101 training so that they're implementing some of this on their own without the funding that we have for them. The last amount of ARPA dollars that we have, we're now looking to expand to another 10 or 11 districts, added districts that we're working on. And as I said before, so what's in the budget now, the governor's budget, is the general fund that we can hopefully to keep that going. We have the list of, we can always get that to you, the list of districts that are currently participating. And for the subcommittee representative, we will be able to share with you the additional districts that it will be going to as well.
You anticipated my next question, so thank you very much. And I'm a very strong advocate of the program, as I can see the positive results that it's having, and it's all interrelated with our student success and learning. So that, if I may continue, I also noticed there is 3.5 million dedicated for the masterclass in the science of reading, which is another very important initiative that you've partnered with CAPS on. Could you just talk a little bit about where that status is and how that 3.5 million was determined? Is that an adequate amount if we're going to reach out to all of the districts? And is that again through ARPA dollars?
Right.
Thank you.
And so thank you again for the masterclass. This is really about making sure that our districts as a team can get really high quality professional learning, professional development around the science of reading. And so we've dedicated out of our state set aside COVID relief funding, our ESSER dollars, we've dedicated $9.5 million that we've started for a few years now to work on and to have these cohorts trained from the districts. We have a cohort that's beginning relatively soon with the ESSER dollars. The 3.5 million, again, which we're so grateful to see there because it's showing the state commitment as well, will allow us to add another cohort of about 20 or so school districts. So that's what that would buy for us. There's certainly room. That's not going to cover the entire state based on what we've done right now. However, we appreciate at least being able to continue the work going forward.
And if I may, that's the hope, to be able to continue to get out to as many districts as possible. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I do have, shall I wait? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next is Representative Curry, followed by Senator McCrory.
Good morning, Commissioner. Apologies, I'm not there in person. So I'm not going to touch on the 150 million. We all know how I feel, and you're not the one making decisions on that. So we'll move through that. But with respect to the 400 million in ESSER dollars that I believe the governor is out kind of saying that this is available resources that may be allocated otherwise. So just as recently as last week, we received kind of information from districts saying that they were unaware of some of the reporting requirements, including the folks over at CASBO. So has anything recently gone out in the last week to districts to maybe clear up any sort of misunderstanding that the documentation is needed, so that those spreadsheets that are being passed around aren't being misinterpreted as being unallocated within the district, which I think Ajit just referenced. So I appreciate him doing that.
So thank you, Representative. We have constantly, I meet with superintendents on a monthly basis, third Fridays with the commissioner. And I tell you, just about every time we meet, we talk about what's required around the ESSER dollars. Ajit's been demonstrating the dashboard to them so they know how to get information at their fingertips to know what they have and what's available to us. I can certainly go ahead and put it in writing again so everyone is clear. As Ajit just mentioned, so we've been working with the districts to say all along, well over a year, that even though there's a budget approved with the State Department of Education, you can make changes, right, as you go forward and get those budgets reapproved as things are happening. When we get our assessment data out there and you see how kids are performing or where the challenges are, you can always change that and get that information to us for approval. And so we will continue, Representative, to share that information with the districts. As Ajit mentioned, everyone's using the reimbursement processing system. And even on our expenditure dashboard, we've been clear to put a note there, having worked with our superintendents, that balances doesn't mean that you necessarily don't have a plan in order for spending. And so we've been clear on that as well. Going back to Ajit's point, though, we need to be very clear that with the runway and the months in front of us, we've got to make sure that obligations are indeed taking place. And we'll continue to remind districts of the timeline that we need for that to happen.
I appreciate that. And we'll relay that over to the folks at CASBO and the superintendents so that they can know that that information is forthcoming. With respect to the VOAG shortage in the current fiscal year, I know we didn't see anything in the governor's deficiency bill. I'm assuming with some of the lapses that you have, we would be able to FAC the $775,000 to cover the current year's deficit. Is there any intention for the department to bring that forward to us on FAC?
So we will certainly take a look at that to see where we are and what we have for resources in order to do that. I'm certainly not opposed to being able to talk that through with OPM and moving forward with that.
Thank you. Just a last comment, not a question, Madam Chair, because I'm sure my good co-chair is going to touch on this. A little concerning with the $6 million cut in Aspiring Educators Diversity Scholarship. I think your talent office is doing a fantastic job trying to get at the teacher recruitment and retention issue between Teach Connecticut Apprentice Program, Ed Rising, and the Aspiring Educator Network. So we hope to kind of continue to see a lot of those efforts continue the way in which I think the legislature and hopefully the administration believes they should be. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator McCrory.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Commissioner. Good to see you here today.
Good morning.
And your team. I think my co-chair just stole some of my thunder in regards to the $6 million cut in the Aspiring Educators Diversity Program. I know we're looking to expand this program to further districts. I think that cut would be unnecessary, especially when we had the guy off to a very quick start. There was no marketing to the program and so on and so forth. So that's not the question I wanted to ask. I have two quick questions in regards to one, the school meals program. I noticed that we're backfilling some of the dollars from fiscal year 24 and 25 to continue this program. However, do you expect to see this program in your budgets moving forward? Because after, and I know after ESSER funds runs out, we want to know if this program still is one of the priorities for the administration. That's my first question. And my second question is, can you explain the reduction in the open choice program?
Okay. So thank you, Senator. Good to see you as well. A couple of questions. So let me start with the school meals program. And as you know, in the budget, a part of it is budgeted through ARPA and the other part in the general fund. So that certainly, again, shows some commitment moving forward to have it in the general fund. And we continue to work with the federal delegation as well around school meals and what's going on at the national level for funding to occur. So I'm just going to ask John Fasanelli just for, oh, okay. Hi, John. John Fasanelli oversees all the program and just can give a little bit more context to what you see in the budget around the school meals program.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Senator, for the question. So originally John Fasanelli, State Department of Education. Thank you, Madam Chair. So originally in the budget, there was $16 million allocated for school meals, for free school meals for students. The decision was made to provide free breakfast for all students across the state. So through that program, every student in Connecticut has access to free breakfast. Also, every student who is eligible for reduced price meals, that's a partially subsidized meal. The federal government pays about $2.85 and the families pay about 40 cents. So that category of students gets free meals as well. So reduced price students get free lunches and free breakfast, and everyone gets free breakfast. So over the course of the last several months, we've been calculating the utilization rate of those funds. And that's why you see in the governor's budget, the $11.2 million allocated to continue that program. That's our estimation of the cost of the program going forward. Further, in the governor's budget, it splits that cost between ARPA funds, $5.6 million in ARPA funds, and $5.6 million in general fund dollars to continue that program into next year.
So hopefully that answered your question, Senator, on school meals.
Yes, and the question around open choice, can you explain that reduction in funding?
Sure. Thank you very much. And I have Robin Cecere, who is our Director for Choice Programs, who will speak to that as well.
Good morning, and thank you for the question. The Open Choice Program right now, the way it's funded, has consistently been within the appropriation amount as enrollment continues to expand at relatively slow paces. The appropriation contemplates an increase of about another 100 to 200 students. Open choice is largely in terms of enrollment.
I can barely hear you. Said you expect a decrease in the number of students?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, expect an increase in enrollment over the next year, and it's the appropriation reflects that. I think the way this new framework works, they'll have that 3% increase, which will support continued enrollments. And by eliminating that lowest tier percentage, that puts those districts that can't enroll much more than the 2%, they'll get at least the benefit of now $4,120, which will continue to support districts using their capacity to give that advantage to students participating in the program. The program is largely, in terms of enrollment, in the Greater Hartford region. And in the Greater Hartford region, beyond that attendance grant, there are so many other fiscal supports that we continue to provide to districts and encourage the increased enrollment, especially at the upper grades, and using those additional supports. So there's a many different pieces of funding support for the program, and it continues to, the appropriation amount continues to support where the enrollment is and where it's continuing to grow to.
So I'm just confused. If we know the enrollment is increasing, and you actually reduce the smallest amount, I think it was $3,000 per child for growth, how can you reduce the budget by $10 million if you know that the program and enrollment is increasing?
Well, I think the appropriation actually increases. It's another 1.5 million that's in the budget to support those increased enrollments, plus the additional 3% increase. So that really reflects that enrollment expectation. That 10 million wasn't built into the budget. It was that 1.5 that will support that contemplated increase in enrollment. It's not contemplated to be beyond that amount.
Maybe I'm not asking the question right. When I get to working group, maybe I can ask my question a little better. Again, if you're telling me enrollment is increasing, you're telling me you're increasing the value or the grant for per pupil per student to go continue to increase enrollment in these programs. But yet you have a budget here, 11.4 million in the original governor's budget, and now the recommendation is 1.2 million. That's a difference of $10 million. I just don't know how you go from increasing enrollment, increasing the value of the grant, and then also reducing the amount of the budget. So I'll ask those questions and thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Senator, you asked about the Aspiring Educators Diversity Program and what's
Yes.
going on there. And we're so thankful for having that. And we're advertising, marketing that program. When we got it out last time, we had over 300 applicants, but then it came down, those were high schoolers who were not yet accepted in an ed prep program, so they did not qualify.
Right.
And so we ended up with the 29 that met all the qualifications from our priority districts. So we are marketing, and we anticipate if we get up to the 300 again, certainly the $4 million allocation would cover that. But at the end of March is when we'll have that application closed. We'll get a very good idea of what those numbers are coming in at, and we're certainly.
Thank you, and that's why it's a good idea not to touch it, because you're not going to be aware of what those numbers are going to look like, especially if you look forward to expanding the program for other opportunities for children in this district. So I'll be very hesitant about reducing that number until we get a full understanding of where we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next, Representative Felipe.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Madam Commissioner. Always nice to see you.
Good to see you.
My question is pertaining to the $150 million that we had put in for education last year in the budget, particularly the cut in tuition for BOAGs and magnet schools. We've heard a couple of times folks in the administration say that money will not be getting back to the classroom, getting back to districts. Can we get just a further explanation of what exactly they mean by that? Because I don't quite understand.
All right, so I can share with you, and I'll have Robin to jump in as well. The magnet school funds are used at the local school level. I think that will be, at least you can hear that from what we know as to what happens there.
Yeah, actually, when OPM did an analysis of the tuition cap and then the complementary funding to mitigate the lapse for those RESC operators, it would actually underfund those RESC operators in terms of the magnet programming. So the way the magnet formula works, having that tuition for RESCs who are not taxing authorities, that allows those operators to fulfill programmatic requirements. On the district side, districts retain that count for every student that participates in a magnet programming. So they continue to receive their ECS in order to maintain sort of that support within their district. But those students are actually attending a magnet school. So in terms of the funding structure, the ECS typically with participation rates, if you look at participation rate patterns, those districts where there are higher tuition amounts, they're receiving more in terms of a per pupil ECS by retaining that count. It works similarly with the open choice. Those districts retain half of a student count for students participating, and there is no tuition component. So it's structured around that idea that the magnets are receiving the operating grant, and then the districts are continuing to retain their ECS while paying tuition for only those students who are participating in a RESC operated magnet.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just think that we should have done it in a way that maybe gets them to fill that gap, right? We can figure out how to get there, but the amount of money that a lot of these schools have to pay, a lot of these districts have to pay for tuition, even to the rest, especially to the rest, is, being in the Chef region now, it's hard to look at it and not see the impact that could be made just with, a few $1 million here and there for some of these districts, hiring teachers, making sure that some of the things that they've done over these last couple of years, because I know that they've tried very hard not to spend ESSER to hire teachers and paraeducators and special ed teachers, but they've done it. And we need to give them some sort of, some sort of relief on that. I think this is the way that we were trying to do it. I just hope that we can work in the future to make sure that we can fill that gap. I don't want to leave the rest out. I don't want to have the magnets feel that they're not being met with the needs that they have. But we need to make sure we're looking out for our local districts as well.
And Representative, I'll add to that, and thank you, appreciate that as well, that we recognize that federally, the U.S. Department of Education also recognizes that the COVID relief funds going away will be a challenge for districts. And so we're also working very hard to look at the existing permanent title dollars that districts have to make sure that for some of the work that they were doing, that resources are also available to them to continue some of that good work as well within existing federal resources that they have.
Yeah, I want to thank you and thank you for all your work. And Madam Chair, I know I went a little bit long with my explanation, so that'll be my second question.
There's a long line of second questions.
Up next is Representative Chalaski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In that same vein about magnets and tuition, and I apologize if this was already covered, but there's a separate place for magnet tuition assistance, if I'm not mistaken. So how is that? First of all, what constitutes an eligible town to receive that tuition assistance, and how is that calculated? Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a creature of statute. So there are certain districts in it's sort of permanent statute, East Hartford and Manchester, that do receive tuition support. If their participation is over 4% in their district, then they receive $4,400 per student in tuition reimbursement or relief. Over the last 2 years, there has been funding dedicated to supporting a broader group of towns who have higher participation rates. Last year, there was 11 million in ARPA funds that were allocated across districts. It was shared amongst a group of districts with higher participation rates. And then in this year's budget and in statute, there are relief for certain districts, including Hartford. There's a $3 million allocation. Then for Bloomfield and Windsor, there's a $30 million allocation shared with New Britain and New London. And then there's an ARPA allocation to New London and New Britain of another $3 million. So that's written into the legislation from last year to support those districts that have higher tuition rates.
And very quickly, there's also money for family resource centers allocated in the budget. How is that allocated?
So the family resource centers, there are 58 functioning family resource centers in Connecticut. I believe based on the breakout, each of them get a little over $100,000 as their base grant.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. For the first time, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for your work and your presentation today. And I just wanted to follow up on Representative Felipe's remarks with respect to the $150 million that has been transferred out of this part of the budget. I just wonder, there were remarks initially made by Secretary Beckham saying that this would not have an impact on the local schools. However, one of the things that is very confused in my district anyway, I'm not sure about everybody else's, that when we have special education costs that go beyond what we've budgeted for, we borrow from the town and then go and pay the cost through whatever we get for grants back from the state after the year is over. So sometimes we get blamed and budgets get voted down because there's a misunderstanding about this. Could you please just explain to me this $150 million and the systematic process that we have with respect to how the towns actually supplement the education budgets with respect to special education?
So a big question about special education funding and the state funding that's available, the IDEA funding that is available. as well, and the excess cost that is also appropriated and paid to districts. So there's a lot in that space,
I know,
Representative.
that's why I'm asking the question.
You know,
Need help.
so there's a, so we, for IDEA, for example, the federal funding that comes in allocated to districts, varying amounts. We have that information. Is that on our EdSite data portal as well? IDEA.
The grant?
The grant is on there. So that information is there so everyone can take a look at it. And so that's kind of the first place for funding. We also got additional IDEA COVID funding from the federal government that also went out to our districts as well. The districts report to us through excess cost and again, paid over a certain amount that they have 4.5 times what the actual costs are. We also recognize, though, in that space for the excess costs, that the numbers, seem to come in higher of the numbers of students who are eligible than what's appropriated. And in legislation, then we have to prorate that to districts. So there is that interplay that is there. There is, however, right now, a special ed task force that is working to take a look at all of this holistically. I know they're looking at funding, they're looking at all that, and I believe their report is due pretty soon for everybody to take a look at so we can have further dialogue about what they've learned through the task force and what recommendations are being made on that around special education.
Thank you so much for that. I just hope that we're able to clarify how this works because it is every single year. My Board of Finance doesn't understand it, and I don't. And we do elections on our budgets. A lot of the bigger towns don't, but they don't understand what's going on with special ed. And I'd love to be able to see how the state interprets this situation in terms of how it applies to the local communities. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to be clear, this 150 million didn't have anything to do with special education, but we did put in the budget $25 million, which each year on special education, both in fiscal 24 and fiscal 25. And in fiscal 24, we were told that we would get to close to 100% fully funding special education on the excess cost component of things. And now we're hearing from districts that they're only getting prorated down to 70% of their costs. So what would the dollar amount have to be for us to fully fund that excess cost component?
So thank you. And we've been looking at that number as well. And certainly for our committee here, and we'll bring the information back to you as to what it is that's the uncapped amount that comes in and what we've had for that's appropriated. That's what causes the calculation to happen, and folks don't necessarily get exactly what they think they would based on the numbers come in. I think this past year, the highest increase that we've seen in that amount of students, the cost that's come into the state, higher than we've ever seen. So we will certainly bring that information back to you, Senator, so you can have all that information.
In the work group, so that
In the
we
work
can,
group,
and
yes.
so that we can understand what it is, because last year, having sat at the table, Representative Walker and I were told specifically that the 25 million would get us up to 100% for the excess cost for districts. And when we now what we're hearing from districts is they're getting, even at tier 1, because we tiered the response if it's not at 100%. And even at tier 1, they're only getting 70-something% on special education. So we really need to understand that. I also have a question on school meals. And so the school meal component of things was set up so that we could get breakfast out to everybody, right? And right now, the schools that get CEP, their breakfast costs, their school meal costs are higher than they're getting from CEP. Does a portion of this grant go to cover the delta for those CEP districts that are only getting 80 cents on the dollar for the cost of it? So, for example, my colleague comes from New Haven. So is the New Haven school getting anything from this the dollars that the governor has in his budget to pay that delta for the schools, in particular, the urban communities that qualify for CEP.
Thank you, John.
So thank you for the question. The CEP schools, by virtue of the federal regulations, are required to provide breakfast to all students regardless of eligibility. I believe in New Haven, as well as most of the major cities who are participating in CEP, that their identified student percentage of free students who are eligible for free meals is high enough so that they're getting reimbursed at the highest rate of reimbursement for all meals served. New Haven might be just a couple of percentages below, but between 95 and 100% of their meals are reimbursed at the Fed's highest rate, which is $4.25.
Which is less than the cost of the meal. The
$4
federal rate is less than the meals actually cost, is what I'm saying. So you get $4 for a meal, $4 and change, whatever it may happen to be. But the school is actually paying $5 for their product because they don't have anywhere to get from a vendor a $4 meal. That's what I'm trying to figure out is the delta. We're talking to schools and schools are saying let's just talk breakfast for now. And they're saying our breakfast costs $5. The federal rate is less than that, is 20 cents less than that. So if they're getting $4, they're still paying $5. Is the state then assuming the delta for so that the schools are made whole?
So in this program, not for the community eligibility provision schools, no. So the districts have to work within their budgets to provide those meals. I know in New Haven, I think the district puts in $5 to $7 million to make it break even. But I believe New Haven also gets what we call a severe need rate because of their percentage of students eligible for free. They get a higher reimbursement. It may not cover the cost of their meal production, but that's part of the process. We don't really have a way to adjust the federal reimbursement.
Well, I'm not trying to adjust the federal reimbursement. I'm saying the state is putting in dollars for meals. And the state is then saying, but we're not going to do anything for those towns who have been feeding children forever. Norwich, New Haven, Hartford, Bridgeport, all of the larger urban areas and poorer rural areas have been paying for this, but they are not getting the cost of the meal. So if the state is going to put money in the budget for school meals to expand the school meal program, they should also be paying the delta of the difference between what they get from the feds. I mean, we're covering all kinds of federal things now. Everybody said, no, we're never going to cover federal programs. Well, Tony and I sit up here every day and we have in this budget that the governor is representing to us, and in many other ways, we have people saying that we're going to cover this federal program. We covered yesterday, we covered LIHEAP, we're going to cover domestic violence. We're covering all kinds of things, right? Let's face it. We're supposed to get 40% on special education costs, and we're not getting that from the feds. So I'm just saying that should we not be covering out of this of the dollar amount, if we cover out of the dollar amount, the delta for those schools that are not getting the total cost of the meal, and yet in other schools that don't qualify for CEP, we're paying for the whole school meal because the schools are not required to put anything, but we're requiring the poorest districts to put in their own money to meet that need. So this seems to me that we have to look at this from a needs-based method so that that the program is not just covering those communities that have a little bit more wealth, are getting 100% of the school meal, and the districts that are getting all of their funding from the feds are only getting 80%.
Yeah.
So that I think we have to look at that. And then while you're looking at that, to come back to the work group, tell us what that delta would actually cost us, please. I've been getting a ton of emails on school meals since this, and I am a huge proponent of school meals. But I don't think that we're being real on this. And the other thing is the program requires a child to take a piece of fruit, milk, and a muffin, or whatever they're giving them these days for. And the kids don't want all of that. They just want the piece of fruit. So the kid on his way out the door is throwing in the garbage, the milk and the muffin. Why can't we just let them take, why can we not say, in particular for those schools that we are paying for 100%, if we can't change the federal regulations, we require them to take everything. If we're putting in some state dollars here, we should make the rule to give them the opportunity to choose what they want. If they only want to take the apple or orange or banana or whatever other, maybe a grapefruit or two, I don't know what we're giving them these days. But it seems to me to make sense that we manipulate the program that's best for us if we're putting in all the money for this. So if you could come back with why we can or cannot do that, that would be helpful for us to understand. So that we would do that.
No, we will certainly do that. It's looking at the federal rules for the program and now state rules is a new construct where so many states are putting in resources into these federal programs. And so we'll take a look to see if there's any impediment around that and what that would look like.
That would be great. And because we have enough food pantries that could come and get the extra food, you know. Representative Walker.
Thank you. And I hate to go back to the beginning issues, but when we talked about obligation and listing in the ARPS, the districts, in order for them to get or receive the funds, have to give you the details of what they're obligating that money for in order for it to be released. Is that correct?
They actually have to give us, they're claiming reimbursement. So they spend it and then give us information saying they have spent it on XYZ and seek reimbursement from us.
Okay, and that to make sure that they have the ability to spend it on those things, they need to send it to you to make sure that it fits into the categories that are acceptable.
Exactly. They need to have an approved plan with us, which
Have
has a budget.
Have you ever rejected anybody's application or request?
We actually go back and forth with them to make sure it meets the requirement. So right now, they've all been approved. They were back and forth, as managers are taking a look at what they've submitted, but it's not, oh, you're not approved, there's nothing else you can do. It really is working back and forth with any grantee, for example.
The only thing that I was getting questions on was if they've not gone through your process, then the money is not going to be paid out. So they have to give you that information so that they can get the money paid out, correct?
Right, that's correct.
Thank you.
They have to have an approval.
So Tony and I have been going back and forth on this. This is us. This is the two of us as we're whispering back and forth to each other, actually talking about this issue. We have a date from you on obligation. Does a district have that? If a district has X number of dollars and they are obligating X number of dollars within the district, in order for it to be formally obligated, does it have to be sent to you, or do they have in their own district right to obligate it before they actually send it to you? It's that piece that we're missing.
They don't have to send us evidence of every obligation at the time of obligation. The challenge will be if they don't liquidate, which is spend all their money by the deadline. So the current deadline is January 28th of 2025. This is for ARP ESSER. And if they want a longer runway, then they will be providing us with evidence saying that, yes, we made these obligations before September 30th of 2024, and we need a longer runway to spend them. So the evidence we'll say is, hey, did you obligate it by September 30th, 2024? Okay, that's an expense that we can allow, or we can request the feds for permission to have longer time to spend it. So we're not asking for evidence on every obligation they make. When they seek reimbursement from us, because we're trusting that the obligation is in line with the plan, right? So when they seek reimbursement from us for what they have spent, If it's routine stuff, we're approving them. If it's very large requests for reimbursement, $10 million, $20 million, we might say, hey, do you have some backup on this? And we get the backup, we approve that reimbursement payment back to them. So it's kind of a flow that works seamless. I mean, I think it's working reasonably well with the districts to continue to disperse the funds. Again, main thing is obligate by September.
We
3rd.
get that point. We're just trying to we understand that. And we have no problem you asking for detailed, what they're spending it on. We ask that all the time. We're trying to get to the point that the governor put out that there's $440 million that has not been obligated. And some districts are saying, but we have already obligated it. We just haven't spent the dollars yet. We haven't
That's correct.
liquidated the dollars yet. And so our concern is that people in the general public think that schools are sitting on a nest egg when that nest egg may have already cracked and the the chicken has been born.
No.
And we haven't actually done anything with it. They haven't fed the chicken. They haven't done all the things they need to do. But I think that a lot of people thought that $440 million was available to cover costs, that the $150 million was slated to be given to them. And it may already be obligated on things that are, which is something they can do. So we just want to make sure that the obligation plan doesn't have to be sent to you first.
So let me just clarify as well, and this is really great conversation because these are the questions folks are asking. It starts with an approved plan or budget with us. And that's what we say at this point in time, as we do for ourselves. Continue to take a look to see if what you thought you were going to spend on is really what you're going to really spend it on. And so that really is important. We keep saying is that you need to take a look. You've got your data, things are moving, you've sent this in to us a year ago. What do you still want to do? So it starts with that budget. And we've always said you can always come back to us within this time frame to get that budget approved. That would then set up your obligation, right? So it needs that approved plan. Then you set up your obligation for that, right? And then you draw the money down after you've spent it. As you can see from the ESSER 2, and the reason we continue to say this, we know it's still sitting with us, the resources.
Right.
What we don't see is your $60 million, for example, that you have. Are you all set with the plan that was approved? If not, then you need to right now be thinking about how you're going to change that. And after you change that plan, what are you obligating based on by the timeline? So you see, it's a lot of resources out there. And we just want to make sure that folks are giving themselves the time to really thoughtfully think about. And you're exactly right. Some of them may have already done that. We won't necessarily see that on the end. This is why we said there's a plan. But we still get a little bit nervous with the amount of resources there because we don't want to miss any of these timelines.
Thank you. We have more questions on this, which we'll take to the working group. Representative McCarty.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And we already approached this topic, but I'm very concerned about the special education excess costs. And I think we need to look at that and find a solution, a permanent solution going forward. In looking at my calculation and what I'm hearing back, it looks like we're going to be very short funded again, and there was no increase in the governor's adjustment plan. So would you be able to comment why you think some of the special ed costs, I mean, it's over the 20 percentile now, I believe, and it's really rising. I know the special ed task force is in place and we will get an interim report, but I would like to recognize the school and state finance project and we had brought this to the attention before. Maybe at the working group, we can talk more about it, but I would like to see if there's a possibility going forward, if we couldn't use that in our ECS formula as a weighted provision for special education costs. I think that would really help us moving forward, because the districts, with what we're seeing with the different cuts that are taking place, there's just more and more pressure on our district. So I guess it's mostly to talk to you about, do you think we can find a permanent solution going forward, and what your attitude would be looking at putting that as a weight on the ECS formula going forward? I think we're going to be short over 70 million this time around. So thank you.
So yeah, just quickly, and we'll bring the information back to you, but I know we did some calculation.
So the excess costs are hard to predict. We try to be as transparent as possible, but they are hard to predict until we get the actual information from the districts in the year in which we have to pay it out. So just to give you an example, last year, the uncapped entitlement request from districts was around $204 million. The appropriation was $181 million. This year, the uncapped entitlement request from districts is $255 million. This is like an increase the size we haven't seen in recent times. I mean, in more than a decade, we haven't seen this amount of increase in 1 year. So it's hard for us to predict what the cost is going to be. So the appropriation still is at 181 million. And even with the tiered structure, even after applying that tiers, we are still way over the cap. So everybody per legislation ends up getting reduced proportionally. And so on average, you end up with the 70%. So it is an entitlement. We're trying to work. I mean, we have to work legally within the appropriated amount, unfortunately. And so that's what's happening here.
And what we're hearing is increased cost of tuition, and just everything is just more expensive, really, at the end of the day for services being offered. But we can provide you more information at the work group for that.
Right. And I appreciate your response, but I would look forward to continuing that work. I'm not particularly a fan of the tiered approach. I think we should be really looking at fully funding because it's such, and we need to provide these services. So yes, I'll look forward to talking to you more. Thank you.
And I look forward to Representative McCarty voting on breaking the spending cap so that we can. That's what I look for.
No, I disagree. And I say that where there's a will, there is a way, and that.
And there's only a way when we have more money.
We will talk.
Okay.
Oh, my God.
Representative Curry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's not pile on Rep. McCarty. Madam Commissioner, with respect to excess costs, and I appreciate Ajit giving the explanation. Again, and kind of in the same vein in which the information of districts are claiming weren't getting out about ESSER, has something gone out to districts explaining why when they looked at the reimbursement was less? Because what we're hearing from districts is that there was no explanation. They're not sure why. And obviously, this is a very simple explanation that 255 is more than 200. And so just curious if that information is going out or has gone out.
Thank you again, Representative. And what I'm hearing and will do today is that we have many conversations, but I need to put it all in writing as well. And this is another one that we will also explain in writing to districts and continue to reiterate it when we meet with them in our meetings as well. So I will make sure that that's happening.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner. And I just want to thank Robin for her comments when she was up with respect to the, I think, responding to Representative Felipe with 150 million and the magnet cap, and acknowledging that there was, in fact, an understanding between language in the budget and what she noted as complementary funding, I think, which dispels some of the assertions that have been made that there was no language. And so this was a little bit more flexible for folks to reallocate. And then also along the lines of the magnet school tuition cap, again, I think it's a bit misleading to make the assumption that sending districts keep that portion when of the ECS allocation when, in East Hartford, thousands of kids are sent out of district. Enrollment remains the same. And so those 1,000 kids are spread out throughout the entire district. So it's not a joint savings that a district is going to see. And so curious around, has SDE done any sort of analysis of special education and transportation costs for those districts who are sending or who are exercising choice?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question about transportation in particular. We just procured a study with UConn to look at transportation. It's the first step in a two-step study series to look at transportation costs and how that's impacting the system, participation, and families themselves. The first part really was to look at family decision-making. So it was less looking at the actual cost allocations, but really looking more at how families are making decisions and how is transportation impacting those decisions. Then part two, we'll look at the cost structure, taking into account how families are making their decisions. So transportation is just a critical piece. You know, you can see the increasing cost associated with it, compounded by the various shortages around bus drivers, et cetera. So it is a complicated program, and we want to look at it so that we're considering what families are the decisions they're making and how to best align with those decisions while considering the cost. So that's up for this year. The RFP is going out for that second part. Around special education costs, I think that's something that we continue to look at and work with districts on. You know, we've talked about the rising costs associated with those. And we know that for districts, it's a pressure point when students are participating in choice programs. So, you know, a lot of the design is around how to better support districts in that work. We changed the statutory structure a few years ago around magnet so that the receiving district is the sending district is participating in both the 504 and the IEP, the PPT discussion, so that at least provides a collaborative to support how that funding plays out. But it continues to be something that is evolving, and I think districts are doing a better job between district and magnets on those planning structures so that at least there's the information and the budgetary considerations in advance of actual implementation.
I appreciate that, and especially around the transportation. I hope that we take into consideration when you're doing that study, and I think we might have that conversation this year in the Education Committee around what free city bus transportation looks like, and for some of our students, and providing additional access to opportunities post the school day, as well as getting at the chronic absenteeism issue. So hopefully that can be worked into what you're looking at to see how we may come at that issue from a number of different ways. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, and maybe we can get transportation in some parts of the state. Could you bring to the working group a couple of things that I would like to have? What would be the cost for adding on the 2 already approved charter schools? What would be the cost for the first year for both of those? And on the American School for the Deaf, I really was extremely disappointed that we would cut the American School for the Deaf. So I would like to understand what the long-term plan is, or if you have a long-term plan to teach students that are deaf and need sign language. And that school has an ability to do things that cannot happen in the district. So if you could bring that to the working group too, that would be appreciated. And Tony has a few to add.
Could you also bring to the working group your staffing? And how many new people you have added on, and how many people have you lost? And have you gotten somebody to take over all of your finances in there? And that position's been available for quite some time. So we'd like to know how you are planning on filling those positions. And any communication that you would be sending out to the districts about the ESSER, could you send them to Madam Administrator so she can send it out to the Appropriations Committee so we are all well informed? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Up next is Commissioner Bai, Office of Early Childhood.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner. If you want to just hit a couple of highlights, and we'll get right into questions.
Sure. I have submitted my testimony. The governor has a robust early childhood agenda to address recommendations from the Blue Ribbon Panel that I really believe represents the state's needs based on a significant public hearing process. The other thing I just wanted to say is I had a listening session last week at the office around the governor's proposal and the budget. And I think we have to really recognize our state.
Commissioner, I can't barely hear you.
Okay. I wanted to say, I just want to thank the team at OEC. I think there's so many hardworking public employees working to make our systems work, and sometimes with a lot of challenges. So I have many here with me today to help answer questions, but just really want to thank Team OEC. Thank you. And you have my testimony. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. So I want to go right into Care for Kids.
Yep.
So when we passed the budget last year, we had additional dollars, and both Representative Walker and I said, this is going to serve less children. And we know that there was more money put in, but it actually served about 4,000 less students, from the 21,000 down to the 17,000.
Let me get my Care for Kids budget
Sure.
up. So in terms of this current budget was planned for 18,500 children, and the budget adjustment moves that up to 20,150 children.
But that is at a higher rate.
At a higher rate, with an 11% increase for providers last year and an 11% increase going forward.
Correct. And that, but there is a waiting list right now of some, at least 3,000 children.
Right now, the wait list has 805 children on
Okay.
it. And we have 1,300 applications pending, 13,000 families enrolled, 19,467 children enrolled.
19,000, how many?
19,467. And we were able to, because of funding, able to empty the wait lists this fall. As the numbers dropped when kids go to school, we were able to get everyone off the wait list, which then creates somewhat of a backlog because you're enrolling so many children all at once. And now we have the wait list has 800 children on it now, waiting 2 months on average on the wait list.
So
to
two
start
months
the
on,
application process. Yep.
2 months on average for the wait list that we have for Care for Kids.
Yep.
You have 1,300 applications. How long does it take to process an application?
It depends. There are some priority groups, JFIS, TANF, DCF. They go right in, they don't go on the wait list. They go right into processing, which takes 4 to 6 weeks to get everything through. And then for others, there is the wait list, which adds 2 months to that process because there is a 2-month wait.
So you have 805 on the wait list. You have 13, and you have a group of kids that never go on the wait list. They go right into services.
Yes.
So disregarding them, the 1,300 applications that you talked that are pending applications that are neither on the wait list nor processed.
I believe if we say their applications, they've been through the wait list, but I'm going to turn to Julie Giacone. Julie, do you mind coming up and introducing yourself and explaining, when you say applications, at what phase is that? Just introduce yourself and your position. And get close.
Hello, Julie
We're going to give a
Giacone,
tutorial on how to speak here.
CCDF Administrator at the Office of Early Childhood. So on the Care for Kids website, you'll see like 1,300 applications that are pending. Those are applications that they've received. They have received them. They know that they're there, but they have not been processed yet.
So they're not on the wait list.
They're not on the wait
no.
list.
So
No,
that's at 1,300 individual
Yeah.
children applications or 1,300 families.
family.
So they might have more than one child.
Yes.
That is correct.
Like we have 13,800 families and 19,400 children. So that just shows you who are currently
Right.
receiving
And you have
services.
805 families that are waiting for services, or
There are
805 children.
805 children.
So we have to make sure that we all have the right numbers,
Yes.
right? Because we're
Gets
not
complicated.
talking out, I don't know that it's complicated, but when we say that there are applications, and people a lot of times assume that that is, 1,300 kids, but you might have families that have 2 or 3 children,
Exactly.
right? And so the money that we put in last year did not, we didn't have a wait list before that, right? The wait list was not really there. And when we did this, we knew that there was going to be a wait list established that handled the number of kids that were there, right?
Yes, it will help me if I just go back a little further. Before the pandemic, we were serving about 15,000 children. And then we had COVID, there was this high need for childcare, and sometimes because schools were closed, more families needed childcare. We used ARPA funds to increase the number of families on childcare, and then the legislature also increased sort of the ongoing dollars for Care for Kids, to the point that we've gone from 15,000 to 19,000. And to your point, we've been up over 20,000 with some of the ARPA. And we also have dollars that we have now to try to keep the wait list from getting longer. But the issue is, if we say we emptied the wait list in the fall, say we empty the wait list today, then you have to be ready to continue to serving 23,000 children, because we're also in the governor's budget moving the graduated phase out up to 75% of SMI, because too many families get
I
a
thought it
small
was
raise.
65.
We're moving it up to the budget proposed would support going up to 75% of SMI.
I thought that the governor told us that it was 65. Yeah.
It goes up to 65 to get in. So if you can get in to Care for Kids now up to 65% of the state median income.
Yeah.
But if you, a year later, come up for redetermination and you got $1,000 raise, you won't be bumped out until you pass 75% of SMI, because families get a small raise and lose $20,000 in childcare funding. Now, some of that happened because we applied 12 million in federal CCDF funds this year to allow for both the expansion and the graduated phase out to be, rather than 5%, 10%.
So on this vein of Care for Kids, we also went up to not going to school until you're 5. Are you seeing an increase in the number of children that you're serving because they're not going into school until they were 5?
I think we're seeing an increase in applications in general because the programs remained open. The wait list started in 2022, Julie?
It started, we went live last
year.
March of 23?
Yes.
Okay. So prior to that, and Representative Walker and I would deal with this sometimes, we just open and shut the program. And so if we'd gotten to 18,500, we just sort of said, okay, the program's closed. That created a lot of problems in the field and for families. So the wait list, which is used by a lot of other states, helps you to manage the program without having to shut it, and even allows us to have this conversation because we're making a lot of estimates about, like, we set the budget to get to 20,150 children to keep the program open and not make the wait list longer. Because if you go up to 65% of SMI, you've got to make more room in the program. Otherwise, we're concerned about equity issues where the families at the lower end of the pay scale might be bumped out by families at 65% of SMI, for example. So you have to make space. And the wait list allows us sort of to do that, to work the system to the number that's budgeted.
All right, so I think that at the work group, we're gonna have to delve a lot deeper
Absolutely, sure.
into the Care for Kids. And if you could do in that interim, the number of families, the number of actual children that are, how many fit in under 60%, how many will be added because of the 65%, how many children are being added because of the policy change on when kindergarten would start. All of those numbers relative to that. And quite frankly, both of us never heard of the 75%. How many? Yeah, both of us had been told 65 in the conversations with the Secretary of OPM.
Yes, and he was speaking about increasing the income range of families who can get help from Care for Kids. he was probably not talking to you about the graduated phase out, which
He did not.
which we set with policy because it was federal dollars. It wasn't part of the state budget.
But it's part of a
It's part of the plan.
benefit for
Yes.
children. We use federal dollars in every state agency.
Yep.
And I think that in particular, because we are taking on so many of the costs of federal dollars not being there.
Yeah.
If you're using federal dollars for a plan and those federal dollars go away, we have to be ready to stand in to augment that. And if we know nothing about something that has to do with a federal dollar expenditure that we have decided that we're going to do, then we're stuck. The
Yep.
two of us are stuck up here saying, which couch cushion are we going into today?
understand.
And what other thing are we canceling because we have this other obligation? So we really need to understand that.
Sure,
Uh,
we'll bring you the sort of all the pieces. and
That
how
would
they
be
fit together.
helpful.
Yep.
Representative Walker.
Thank you, and good morning still. Good morning, Commissioner. And I want to underscore what Senator Austin was saying, because we're going to have to make choices of which children get services and which children don't. And it really becomes very critical in many ways. So, birth to three.
Yep.
Birth to three, where are we with birth to three? How many do we have? And how long is our wait list?
I'll ask Nicole to come up, but I can tell you that that we don't have a wait list, so to speak, because it is an entitlement. So there are some families waiting to get assigned to services, but they will get services. It's not like they're going to wait. That is a requirement.
How
But
long,
I'll
maybe
have
you can tell me
Nicole.
how long they would have to wait to get those services?
From a call, Nicole, how long are people waiting?
So how the process works is a referral source would call 211. So that could be a parent, a pediatrician, childcare provider, anyone can make that referral. 211 processes those referrals by IDEA Part C law, so Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Part C, which oversees birth to three in all states, early intervention. We have 45 days for eligible children to receive an IFSP. And then from that individualized family service plan, IFSP, we have 45 days to deliver services. We are not seeing a ton of noncompliance in those instances. So meaning we're not seeing those numbers drop down below. So it is an entitlement. We do not have wait lists. We are not allowed to have wait lists under IDEA Part C. And the timeline there is within 45 days. Now, pre-pandemic, we were hovering around that 30-day mark for IFSPs. We're a little bit beyond that 30-day mark, but we are still below the 45-day mark.
And Representative, we are seeing both an increase in referrals and an increase in the number of children and a real staffing crunch for our birth to three providers. So if things were working better, we could get children to services faster, more like pre-pandemic. But I think we're seeing across the education spectrum an increase in children who are exhibiting special education characteristics starting even earlier. And we're seeing a 67% rate of, a third of the kids do become eligible and need services. So it puts a strain on the system.
When we just finished talking to SDE, we went from funding of 181 to 250 in costs in special ed. And I think that's what we're seeing also with kids in a younger group too.
Even younger than 3.
So I guess the issue is, again, I go back to, we have to figure out how we're going to pay. We got to pay for all the kids. And how do we pay that? We have to understand exactly what it is. Now, I understand that this is an entitlement. When we were talking with Department of Children and Families about services too, they were saying that they have a lot of kids that get services, then the services may not be specifically the ones that they wanted, but they're going to make sure that they get services. Is that what you do with birth to 3 also? You then refer them to something else until there's an opening?
I think it's more like Department of Education than Department of Children and Families, because the IFSP is effectively an IEP.
Okay,
And so the law is that they need to be provided with the services that they qualify for as
okay.
part of the Special Education Act.
Okay, so over the last 3 years, could we just get what the increase has been?
Sure.
Maybe we should take it back to COVID, beginning of COVID.
Yep.
So that we can see because I think we need to analyze these trends that we're seeing in
I
these
do too.
areas. And the only way we can do that is with the numbers and what are the needs and how are we going with projections of our needs?
Yes, and across early childhood services, the workforce challenges.
Yes.
And that's why, under Nicole's leadership, we undertook a rate study because you have Medicaid dollars, private insurance dollars, state dollars, federal dollars, all coming together and to support the services. So we do have a proposed rate study, and the plan is to take this year to implement a new approach on rates, which does increase the funding.
So thank you, because I think that's really critical. And then the other one we were talking about was school readiness.
Mhm.
Could we get the same type of
Absolutely.
projections too? Because I think that's going to have the same impact. We're going to see the same trajectory with the needs. And we have to be more realistic about what do we need for education. And if we want the state to be able to fulfill the workforce needs later on, we've got to provide the foundations now, so it would help us. The final one.
Representative, can I just clarify that request?
For,
So you said school readiness, but my guess is you mean the state-funded early childhood program. So that's
Yes.
CDC, school
All.
readiness, and Head Start, state-funded Head Start. We will
Please.
get you those.
okay. The other request is your staffing since 2020
Mhm.
to now, what have you been able to accomplish? I think you're up to about 120,
Eh,
180.
We're about we're 118, and I think we go to 121 with the
121.
budget request. So
Yep.
all that's up to the
We just want,
negotiations.
we want to know what your secret is because we've got a lot of agencies that can't get any, so we got to help out.
Well.
No, thank you.
We have, yeah, and I would say, we have increased our funding with the governor's proposal 90%, and we too face, some staffing challenges,
Yeah.
but we do find that we are making progress with that system.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Up next is Representative McCarty.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
and
Representative.
Good morning, Commissioner, and to your team, and thank you for being here. I'd just like to ask a couple of easy, quick questions. I think
Thank you.
I know in your testimony you talked about looking at I believe it's called the Early Start Connecticut programs,
Yep.
merging several programs for efficiencies, looking at community assessment. Would you speak a little bit about that? Oh, there's 3.5 million, I believe, that's been allocated in the budget. Just give you an opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, those dollars in the budget are allocated, basically, almost all of them for local councils. So the way that we sort of distribute early childhood funding in Connecticut is based on local school readiness councils now, which won't be called school readiness councils, they'll be called governance councils. And because there are state-funded programs that are not in current school readiness towns, we need some new school readiness councils. And we're asking the councils to do some very specific needs assessments. So we increase the rates going to councils, and we expand to additional councils. And we're encouraging collaboration among councils. So, in Eastern Connecticut right now, several towns work together to form a council, and they find that that works. So this will allow either regional collaboration or individual school readiness councils, but it gives funding to make sure that the locals are ready to assign their early childhood plan for the state-funded spaces.
And thank you for that. And if I may have this personal privilege, just want to recognize the great work that you have done in your office to really recognize parents and community engagement, and it's very much appreciated. I think it's the track that we have to keep on. So I
Yes.
appreciate that work. And then I know this kind of goes back a little bit to the question earlier on the birth to three. Could you just explain? I know there's 1.8 million that's been allocated for the Sparkler investment. Just to explain that app a little bit and how that really helps the individuals that need to know where their child and their assessment is. I would appreciate that. Thank
Well,
you.
I appreciate that question because you look at the increase of 1.8 million to birth to 3, and you might think that was for services, but that's where we put in the operating budget, the governor's proposal to make Sparkler permanently available for families. Right now, there are about 24,000 families who are using this app, which is really the ages and stages questionnaire. It's actually a Connecticut innovation out of New Haven, Representative Walker. It's a Connecticut innovation that does the ages and stages for parents or for programs. And then those parents can see where their children might need support. And if the child shows up, like Nicole was just talking about, as needing support in an area, the parent will be connected with Help Me Grow. And so it sort of automatically helps parents enroll and get an assessment if their child is significantly delayed in an area. So the reason it's in birth to 3 is it's part of our child find, which is important for public schools, but we also have child find responsibilities because we have IDEA at OEC too, just the Part C part. So that's why it's in birth to 3. But this makes it free to all families in Connecticut. It would be about $15 a parent if this money wasn't in the budget, and we're really seeing it as a tool that communities are loving. Like Norwalk actually does it with every child before they enter kindergarten. And they just make sure every child has that ages and stages done. Waterbury's been doing incredible outreach with this, and it's really helping them. So it's a tool both that communities can use, but really for individual parents. And if the other thing is, it also gives them activity. So if the child is having language delays, it might give parents advice about how to talk to their child, where to add more language. There are fun activities as well. So we've been funding this as a pilot with grant money, and we believe it's really shown to be an important part of the early childhood system for families.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Representative Felipe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Commissioner.
Sure.
Nice to have you. I guess me and Representative McCarty are like-minded because I'm going to start with the Sparkler screening tool.
Yep.
Just specifically in the write-up, it says management coordination. And when I saw 1.8 million for an app, in my mind, it seemed like a lot of money,
Yeah.
but then I realized I just really don't know. So if we can get an explanation
Sure.
to what management and coordination really is, meaning the breakdown of who's working on it, you
Yep.
know, how many folks are managing and coordinating things,
Will do.
it put that into a better perspective. But my second question, continuing being like-minded with Representative McCarty, but it's about Head Start, and I saw a thread, and I just want to pull it real quick. We, with OFA yesterday, we're talking about the write-ups, and we were told that for Head Start, the goal is to serve 17,000. And can you explain what that means?
Yeah, I might ask Elena Trueworthy to come up here, but what it means is that Head Start is mostly federally funded, and it's really federal to local. So we don't touch it, it goes federal to local. Where the state touches it is in the Head Start supplement. So we help a lot of Head Start's half day, and the legislature, this was before my time, even as chair of Approps, added funding so that Head Start could be more family friendly. And state funds were used to sort of leverage the educational part of Head Start, and then work with Head Start providers to fund them to extend the day. Elena, do you want to speak to the enrollment at Head Start and the Head Start state supplement and introduce it?
Sure. Elena Trueworthy, Deputy Commissioner at the Office of Early Childhood. So yes, the Head Start is federally funded, and the enrollment is approximately 5,600 families and children across the state. And so that includes 1,300 early Head Start, which is prenatal up to age 2, and then Head Start, which is ages 3 to 5. And so we really see Head Start as an integral part to our early childhood system and really leveraging the federal funding. Head Start is a comprehensive model, so it includes a lot of supports for families. Includes medical, mental health, search for jobs, that type of work around family support and services. And so we also have what's called our Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships. And so there are 3 grant recipients that receive this federal funding. And basically that is Head Start programs partnering with childcare programs to get those childcare programs up to Head Start standards.
So I guess what's being lost in my question is,
The 17,000.
right now we're at 19 and a half, right? And then we were told the goal is 17,000. I just don't understand
Yeah.
why the goal. would be
I'm
cut.
not exactly sure where the 17,000 is coming from, but
Okay.
that may be where we combine school readiness, child daycare, and Head Start supplement to the number of children who are served by state-funded
Okay.
early childhood.
Okay.
That's my guess about that number's just about in that ballpark.
That makes sense to me because when I was looking at the SMI increase,
Yeah.
it just felt like if we were trying to go backwards, which we aren't, but if we were, to keep at the capacity that we're at, that money would be better served. But I'm glad that we cleared that up. Thank you.
Yep, thank
very
you
much.
for the
Thank you, Madam
question.
Chair.
Yep, excellent.
Thank you. Up next is Senator McCrory.
Good morning, Commissioner. Bye. How are you?
Good morning, Senator Doug McCrory.
Question in regards to the early start date for kindergarten, as we move the age up to 5. Do you feel as though you guys have any capacity to expand pre-K more slots in the state of Connecticut for those parents who are on the waiting list, not get waivers for their children to start school early? Do you think we have enough, or your organization have enough capacity to support those children that are probably going to be left behind because they cannot start school?
So the question is, capacity issues because of the change in the kindergarten age?
Yes.
Yeah. Our current, in priority districts, and I know we use different language now. I wish we'd like get one term that covers like 1960 through today and we could all talk in those terms, but we have the same problem in early childhood. In priority school districts, about 85% of the school readiness spaces are filled. And in competitive districts that have a Title I school in the district, about 93% of the spaces are filled. So we do have capacity for about 15% more children. But that requires a lot of outreach, and gratefully, the legislature passed some funds specifically for outreach from parents, by parents, to help children enroll in early childhood programs that we're working on developing now to try to get those families who maybe don't trust the system to understand the importance of the early years. So that's some of it. But there are certain cities where population is growing, where, you know, we do not have additional supply available. There are cities that have a lot of magnet schools that have preschools, and in those communities, we have more supply. But I do think there's going to be some challenges for families to access care. And to Senator Austin's question about will there be more care for kids, and your question about do we have capacity, this change happened very quickly and parents had plans in place that changed for them quickly. They had planned on their child being in kindergarten and now need another year of childcare, and their preschools that don't have space to enroll new children because other children are staying. So the system is going to have a difficult adjustment given the time frame of that change. There's no two ways about it.
Thank you.
All set, Senator?
Yes, thank you very much.
Well, you are welcome. Representative Curry.
Good morning, Commissioner. Nice to see you, and apologize that I'm not there in person. So under the policy revisions, you have noted that 3 additional positions for contract oversight for the merging of school readiness and child daycare contract programs. So are there existing human bodies that are currently doing this, and these 3 would be in addition to those, or is this something new that somebody else was doing your oversight for contract management?
Yep. I appreciate that question because it gives a chance to explain what's happening. So part of our system is now contracts as it stands, but the larger portion of our early childhood spaces go through EGMS. So all that OEC has to do in that case is upload the dollars, and then the district downloads them and sends it out to programs. Now, That sounds simple, but the reason we're asking to go to a single system that is contracted is that during the Blue Ribbon Panel listening sessions, the programs that were on state contracts got paid in a more timely way because like to a large city, getting the town council approval of sending dollars out, I'm sure Representative Walker, if you've got the same calls I got about early childhood providers in cities trying to get paid, would wait 3 and 4 months by the time it came from us into EGMS, down to the city, approved by the city council, out to the programs. Whereas if we moved everything to contracts, the community would make the recommendation about programs, OEC would contract directly with programs, pay them quarterly and upfront. This is a way we can help stabilize programs without adding dollars, that they'd get the money in a timely way. They wouldn't be going to their credit lines. And then we would audit at the end of 3 quarters and make up in the last quarter if their enrollment was not what they anticipated. So this is a significant change, and frankly, contracts are harder and more complicated to develop with each program than simply putting the money for Hartford in EGMS, and then they worried about sending it out. It's just that we heard again and again in the public hearings that the delays in getting paid, it wasn't true every place, but in many places, waiting 2 and 3 months to get paid was a real strain for providers.
Thank you for that. And we look forward to hearing the Early Start bill in education. But one final question before we let you go from me. With respect to the Sparkler development screening tool, do you have utilization numbers on that? And if you don't, could you bring those to the work group?
Yeah, we'll bring those to the work group.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And when you bring the information to the work group, can you tell us where the Sparkler, are they a Connecticut-based company? Where do they house their?
It came to us from, I believe it was in New Haven. I'll find out where they're based now, but it's a Connecticut innovation, and other
That's where their
states are
home
picking
base
it up.
is.
Their home base is in Connecticut.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Representative Walker, any last things that you wanted to bring?
I just wanted to go back to the contracting because so it would be the EGMS is a regional contract.
EGMS is an SDE, and so it's just a system that sits there where school districts pull down their dollars.
Okay.
Like, so we make a module, we put it in there, and that's it.
Okay.
Here, we'd be contracting individually with programs, which seemed out of the question until the pandemic. And we realized we could get payments out to programs directly, but it does take a contract, and that takes more staff time.
The reason why I ask is so who would be overseeing to make sure that they're in compliance? Whose responsibility would
The local councils will still be part of the compliance.
Okay.
We believe in this local council model. So it would be the council. We also make sure they comply, and contracts also have, power that you have to meet these requirements that are in the contract. The other was considered a grant. So it was just sort of what we tried to do with Early Start is take the best of both systems, the parts that were working best, and make the new system have those pieces. And this contracts were clearly preferred by providers and provide program stabilization, which they desperately need.
I agree, but I also want to make sure that we've got oversight going on.
Absolutely.
Because when we shift where we put the dollars, sometimes we forget that oversight component because
Yes,
it becomes a little
and that's
easier.
part of the additional dollars going to councils, doing local needs assessment and oversight of their programs that are funded.
So the local councils will be will be reimbursed? Is that what?
There's funding for a
Local
staff
councils?
person at the local councils
Okay.
in the budget. And in the past, it was capped at $100,000. We're proposing capping it at $200,000. It's either 10% of the appropriation to that community for sort of administration, but only up to 100,000. Now we're saying up to 200,000 because we found, again, the larger cities were having to oversee way more programs for not much more funding. So this is proportional, but with a cap.
And the local councils will be reporting to whom? You?
They would be governance councils reporting to us, yes, and,
Okay.
and making recommendations to us about needs.
And how many local councils are we going to have?
Right now, I believe there are 60, I have a map here.
60?
60 some, yeah. There were Connecticut, and when we started the movement panel process, we proposed 6 regional councils, and that lasted about 30 seconds. Because the
grouped
people said, no, no, we want our local councils, and we know what we need in our town. So we have, does someone know these numbers cold? We can bring a map to the work group that shows you where you have existing school readiness councils, where you have new child daycare centers that would be new, would need new council. So 57 councils.
50, okay. So
60 wasn't that far off.
okay, but yeah, you were close. And I guess this is a new type of governance in
It's-
some regard.
It's actually the same set up in 1997 with school readiness, where school readiness said, we want local parents on councils, family resource centers, mayor, superintendent, all sit down and make a community plan.
And they still exist too.
The point is that is what is the governance, that's sort of still the governance body. That was one of the things we kept from school readiness that child daycare did not have, that there would be some local decision-making and bringing people together.
So we're creating another form of LEAs. I
No.
have a panic heart.
No, no, no. It's actually just maintaining the current system that's there for school readiness
Okay.
and expanding it to communities that don't have a council. But if you have like, I'll use an example of Walcott has 45 children, has 45 children total. So it would be 10% of the funding for those 45 kids.
Okay.
To fund, it's usually a portion of a staff person in the school district.
Okay. You know,
Who
would you
has
bring
early
that,
childhood
would you bring it to
responsibility.
us in
Yes,
the
we will do
work
that.
group, because I'm getting yelled at. I'm 10 minutes over.
Okay,
Thank you.
you got it.
I never yell at her. Thank you very much. You know, we're 10 minutes over, Representative McCarty.
Your turn.
All right.
Now she's talking to you, Representative.
I
McCarty.
know.
She already scolded me today, so thank you.
Scolding I do, and just not yelling.
No, she's great. Just on the Smart Start program, which I think is so important right now, particularly since we're looking to preserve as many of those pre-K slots as possible. Could you bring some more information to the working group so we can talk about that a little? And then
Yes.
just a comment, I'm sure Senator Austin is very pleased to see the TriShare pilot program that's coming to Eastern Connecticut to try to fill some of the.
I just want to make sure that every other part of the state has to have a private component to all of their daycare too, because I'm not going
Right.
to take it just in one part of the state just because you can't give us any.
No, I didn't quite get all that.
Yeah.
but,
But just on the Smart Start, one thing to clarify,
Yes.
because there's been some talk that it's an expansion. It is not an
No.
expansion. It's trying to maintain the Smart Start classrooms we have in 10 districts who we were able to,
Right.
like many things,
And
use
those
totally
240.
about 250
slots
kids,
about, yeah.
in that range. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
And appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Otherwise, I'm done scolding other people. You're all set.
Thank you. I'm stepping away before.
Up next is the State Library. Okay, hi, Deborah, nice to see you again. You want to just give us a quick overview and then we'll ask questions?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. I'm Deborah Schonder, the state librarian. Before you have my written testimony, which is a very simple request, we are asking for $725,000, which is currently in our other expenses line, to be moved into 2 separate SIDs, essentially for administrative purposes to make it easier to facilitate the transfer of those funds to external groups. That is the summary, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
I think mostly that was our biggest question. Those were, grant programs that we established and we put in, OE. I think they were in one of the Senate bills, one of the SB bills.
Yes, that's correct.
And, so I think, we understand that, now, and so it's not adding additional dollars, it's essentially moving dollars out of OE into a separate line item so you can track those expenditures better.
Correct. Two separate line items. One is for $225,000, which is to go to local public libraries for their expenses. And then the other is $500,000 to go to local literacy organizations.
And how are my friends in the Library for the Blind doing?
They are doing very well. So one of the things that we've done is we've recently renamed the library. There has been a movement nationally to change some of the nomenclature that's used. So it is now called the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books. And we wanted to focus on that to talk about the services that they are receiving. And in part because it's both the blind and visually impaired or those who have reading disabilities, the federal regulations that govern the program changed a few years ago, and it allowed us to expand the services to people who were not eligible before. So, for example, a student with dyslexia could be part of the program now. So we have been doing quite a lot to work with our advisory committee on talking about programming, expanding services. We've been doing we had about 50 outreach initiatives in the last year, which reached almost 800 people. We've added almost 1,000 readers in the last 2 years to the program. So we have about 6,500 new users. Those may be veterans, students, as well as traditional readers that have been part of the program for quite some time. One of the things that we've used funding that you helped us secure is we are working with Perkins Access to work on a way to educate libraries and museums, not only for reading, but also to allow those who are blind or low vision to come in and visit those facilities. If there's an exhibit, if there's something happening at a museum, they are able to come and hear descriptions of those so that they too can experience it. We also have started a quarterly book club for our readers. So one of our readers advisors works with them and they rotate between fiction and nonfiction books to help create some community and conversation between readers that otherwise might be at home most of the time. So we also have been working with local libraries to develop hub libraries. So this is also more local ways in which readers, if they want to, can come into their local public libraries, learn about the services, get information, talk to our staff. We have also been doing quite a lot with outreach on them, developing new readers and continuing to build the infrastructure and accessibility of the program for the information that we share to them.
And so I found it fascinating that reading mechanisms that you had for the blind or those with visionary issues also could be used for children or adults with dyslexia.
Yes.
And is that because, do you know the science behind that? Is that a reason? Is there a reason why that is happening now that we're finding out that? Is it a focus issue? What is the reason why that works?
I am not sure of the reason why that was changed. It happened a few years ago at the federal level. Let me just check. I will invite Dawn to join us and share an answer with you.
Good morning. Dawn LaBelle, Director of Division of Library Development, overseeing the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books. So with the reading apparatus, the large print books, and the books that combine Braille and large print, for the children with dyslexia or adults of dyslexia, it is the focus. So the larger print, more spacing in the reading materials are more conducive to someone with dyslexia. At the same time, in listening to the book and reading the book at the same time, they are able to connect the visual words with the audio of the context of the story.
Thank you. I just find that fascinating. And doing this, we're not diminishing what we're doing for the original group that we were handling, those that are blind, that are identified as blind.
Absolutely. So we are continuing to provide all of the pre-existing services to them. We're just expanding and bringing in new readers who are able to use the services as well.
And the words that we're using now, are a change at the federal government level?
So the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled is the new name for the federal program that was changed just before the start of COVID. And there was debate among the local regional libraries like us about particularly which wording to use. Some went with print disabled, some went with other terminology, but we chose to go with accessible books. Again, in consultation with our advisory council, because it was focusing on not just the reader, but the services that they were providing to share with them what they would be receiving from us. But there are several different terms that are being used, but that is one of them. And it was led from that initiative at the federal level to change the wording.
So the reason why I'm asking is because in our budget, it says library for the blind. So if we're going to use the same terms, we should use the same terms and with an understanding on what that really means.
Sure.
So, is there any other questions? Representative McCarty?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just quickly, thank you. And I wanted to recognize the great work that our libraries are doing throughout the state. I did receive from my own Waterford Public Library. So thank you. Would you be able to just, at the working group, perhaps let us know the 225,000 in the grants, what the libraries need to do to receive those incentivized grants, and just maybe a little breakdown for that?
Absolutely.
Thank
So I
you.
can give you a quick answer now if we have
Okay.
time. So essentially that is given out to just about 190 public libraries here in the state. So each library will receive about $1,200 of that funding, and it could be used for multiple different purposes. It might be operating expenses, programming, staffing. It is up to the local library in many ways how to use that funding. But they are each required to file an annual report with us about various ways that they provide services and provide information to us. And then as of last year, as long as they also have some collection development policies related to their materials and show that to us, all of those decisions are left to the local level. But submitting a report that shares that information with us, that is essentially what they need to do to receive the funds.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Seeing no other questions, I believe you're all set.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. And up next, that's all you folks over there. Connecticut Technical Education and Career System, known as CTEC. Dr. Solik, I believe you'll be sitting up in the front in the hot seat. Nice to see you, Mr. Riley. All right. Rip, if you, Dr. Solik, if you want to just give us a little bit of a brief overview and then we'll ask questions. You know the drill anyways, you've been sitting there for the whole thing, so.
Good afternoon, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, and members of the Appropriations Committee. It is such an honor to be here again in front of you, as this is only our second year appearance. And we are anxious to share all that has been happening, all the wonderful things that have been happening in terms of the Connecticut Technical Education and Career System, otherwise known as CTEX. So we would be happy to provide you with all the information we can, and we'll certainly follow up with information as well as needed. So thank you for having us today.
So I have a couple of questions relative to CTEC. One of the questions that I had, let's see if I can get to my right sheet, was relative to special education. And you have 82 new positions in for special education. Did you have special education children, teachers that were there prior to you getting your own?
We did, Senator, and in fact, we'd be happy to get you those total staffing numbers so you
That
can
would be
see.
great.
Sure.
You could bring those to us, and the 82 brings you up to full staffing of special education?
Almost, yes. We are, when I look at where we were at a year ago and where we are now, we are very close to full staffing. So, and that is also thanks to the governor's support and the addition to our budget in terms of special education at approximately 6.5 million, which will certainly allow us to fully staff special education, both in terms of full-time teachers and also support staff.
And do you get federal dollars, a federal match on the special education? What would that, and could you?
Yes, we do. We
and-
do get federal dollars to match that. And again, we'd be happy to get you those figures.
That would be helpful if we could get those figures so that we could do that. And are you fully staffed up for world language?
Yes, we are. And I know we talked about that a year ago
Right.
as being a goal moving forward. In fact, not only are we fully staffed, but we have a department head and a consultant in the world language area that is allowing us to pursue that wonderful programming through the State Department of Education that recognizes our graduates who are facile in more than one language. So that has all come together in the past year and a half. So we've made great progress along those lines.
And relative to, my understanding is that the school covers workers' compensation for students who are job coaching on the outside. Is that covered by CTAC? If a student,
I believe that's covered by the state of Connecticut, but again, I can be happy to get you that information in more detail. But yes, we do have liability coverage for students who go out on work-based learning sites and production site visits so that they are protected during the day.
I think that's great. I just wanted to, because we're trying to expand that to the vocational agricultural schools, and would like to understand how it's covered through CTAC. Personally, I'm a fan of anything that we can do to expand the number of seats that you have. I think many students are not really wanting to go to a four-year traditional college, and you can get a very good paying job with the, I've been to some of the events that they have had where kind of like a sporting event where you are now hired by so-and-so. And I find that to be really wonderful because you have kids that get right out of your environment and are making $50,000, $60,000 a year. That to me is a win for us. Representative Walker, do you have any questions?
I just have one. I noticed that you are looking for applications for superintendent of CTEC schools. Is that correct?
That is correct, Representative. In fact, we are conducting a search through CES, which is Fairfield County-based search firm for superintendents in Connecticut. We're working closely with them and with our advisory board. That search will be ongoing through the months of February and March. I anticipate certainly by the end of this academic year, we should have someone in place as a full-time superintendent.
That's great. Okay. I did not realize there was not an acting superintendent.
There is an interim in place at this point, who is doing a terrific job, and we anticipate the full-time position will be identified and put in place certainly by June of 2024.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative McCarty?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and welcome. Thank you for your testimony and presentation. I just have a question. Could you just perhaps at the working group talk a little bit about the transitional coordinators and how they interface, and is there work being done with the Department of Education with those transitional coordinators? Maybe bring a little more information. And Senator Austin was reading my mind on the question with the world language teachers. I know it's been difficult for all of us to find specialists in special education, so we'll be monitoring how you do going forward. But that was basically, and thank you for all the work that the tech schools are doing.
Thank you for that question, Representative. And we have quite a few transition programs ongoing. You mentioned special education, and right now we're focused on certainly a trade-based transition program for those special education students, both students who are currently enrolled in grades 9 through 12, and also students who are adult learners who are looking to garner employment and certainly a successful career in the trade. So that's ongoing. And yes, we do closely coordinate with the State Department of Education. And as you are fully aware, there are lots of mandates and requirements around those transition programs. Members of the CTEX leadership team that are seated in back of me can certainly provide additional information and detail on what some of those transition programs look like, what the staffing ratios are, those kinds of things. We'd be happy to provide that to you around special education.
That would be great. And then to, if I may, just the number of students that have come into the tech schools that need special education. I know there's been a large increase, so that would be useful information.
Absolutely. Be happy to provide that to you.
Thank you.
All set? Representative Felipe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, you asked most of my questions, so mine are going to be a little small. The first one is for the superintendent position. Is the interim in consideration?
The interim certainly has the opportunity to apply for the full-time position, yes. That person would go through the exact same process in terms of the search firm and the resulting interviews, both with the advisory board that we work closely with and CTEX leadership in order to garner that position.
Awesome. And we went to the 82 special ed positions, and I'm sure we'll get to a lot of those in the working group, but one that stuck out to me. Can you explain what exactly a special education attorney is?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part of your question?
One of the positions said special education attorney. I just don't know what that means.
I can certainly determine that for you. Our special education director is seated behind me, so I can check just to see if there is a special listing for that. Behind me and to my right. So yes, there is a specialized attorney that we will require for coverage when it comes to hearings for students and parents and those kinds of activities. And it often is an attorney that we can also share with the State Department of Education who has that special education's focus.
All right, great. That's all of my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Chalesky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In addition to accommodating our special education students, do you feel you are appropriately servicing multi-language learners?
We do. We actually focus in on the requirement known as the Seal of Biliteracy, which is offered throughout the state of Connecticut. We've already had several graduates go through our program with that certificate, and that is going to forward their employment, certainly going forward in a multitude of ways. So we do a great job actually servicing in multilingual and bilingual studies for our students in grades 9 through 12. The program has expanded significantly since my arrival 3 years ago, and I anticipate it will continue to expand, but we are staffed well. We have a solid curriculum in place, again, working in conjunction with that State Department of Education focus and requirements going forward.
That's great. That's good to hear. As you know, or maybe not, Danbury has a large number of multi-language learners. So I appreciate that answer. And also, as a fairly newly separate agency, do you often collaborate with the Office of Workforce Strategy?
That is such a great question. Thank you for that, because we are in the throes of collaborating not only with the Office of Workforce Strategy and Dr. Valerius and under her leadership, but we are also partnering with the Department of Labor. We are working closely with the Governor's Workforce Task Force Group. We meet weekly to really explore ways that we can come together statewide, pool our resources, and build the workforce across Connecticut. So yes, yes, and yes. And we're having a great time just discovering each other's talents and resources and coming together to pool what it is that we do best collectively in each agency so that we're not being redundant. We're increasing efficiency. We're also working under the same goal, which is to really create and deliver the best and biggest workforce in the state of Connecticut. And I believe at this point, we are the only state that has been able to come together under the Office of Workforce Strategy and other agencies to do just that. So it's really exciting work. We're engaged in it wholeheartedly, and much more to come in terms of the outcomes for that.
Sounds awesome. Thank you again. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator McCrory?
Yes, good morning. Good morning. Seeing you again today, Commissioner. My question is kind of on the line of workforce. And I was wondering if we have, or any ideas, we talked before about expanding your capacity for training individuals for jobs in our state of Connecticut. We know there are some areas that specifically their needs are. Expanding your programming in the evening for those individuals we know who have been disconnected based on research we've seen that's come out about 2 or 3 more years ago. There is a huge population of individuals who are 18, between the ages of 18, 25, 26, 27 years old, who can benefit from being trained in services needs that you guys provide in the evenings. When you come to the working group, can we talk about how we can expand your blueprint beyond our traditional K-12 population and start servicing some of our young adults who may be ready for an opportunity, but they didn't take advantage of when they're in high school, but may be able to do it in the evening programs. So I would like for us to continue this conversation in our working groups and thinking about that, how we can expand your blueprint throughout the state. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, Senator. Yes, there are a myriad of ways that we already have undertaken the opportunities to expand learning opportunities for our adult population. And as you so well stated, many of our high school students who finish our programs take either take a break or they go to a 2-year or 4-year college or university and then come back to us to say, gee, we really want to focus in on our own business, our own trade, our own development. And as a result, we now offer adult education, trade-based learning to almost 5,000 adult learners across all of our school sites across Connecticut. Can we expand that? Absolutely. I think there are a few different ways that we can really talk about some serious expansion opportunities. One of them would be our ability as an agency to take what we do best and take it on the road and go to where those adult learners are instead of asking them to always come to us. Certainly trades that require heavy machinery, heavy equipment, those kinds of activities, maybe not so much, but we certainly do have trades, including IT, culinary, and other kinds of settings where CTEX can go out and reach out to those adult learners. Second, we have also talked about expanding some of our school sites. We're about to do a walkthrough in Danbury at Abbott Tech to take a look to see if there's a capacity building on the current school site so that we could add programs, both for our daytime 9-12 learners and our adult ed population. There are other buildings across the state of Connecticut that we can also look at increasing capacity and perhaps expanding over time. And then lastly, Representative Zaleski, you had asked about some of the work that we're doing in the Office of Workforce Strategy, Department of Labor. We're already pursuing some shared site spaces so that we can expand those adult learner opportunities across the board, because many of the adult learners who may be working through the Department of Labor can easily come to us, or we can come to them as well. And we actually visited the Department of Labor in Waterbury, where they have an absolutely beautiful American Job Center site that we can easily adapt to and provide instruction. So there are many, many possibilities, and a lot of those partnerships discussions across the state are taking a look at just that.
All set, Senator?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I think you're all set.
Thank you very much.
Then you'll bring that information to us, to the working group. Thank you.
We absolutely will. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Representative.
Conclude the meeting? Oh. Representative Walker is reminding me that to conclude the meeting. So, yes, the meeting is now, the public hearings are now completed. We will return here at 2:00 for the public hearing portion. We have 329 people to testify tonight. 329 people.
We don't all have to talk.
And we expect them all to spend 3 minutes or less, and we will have translators, both in Spanish speaking and deaf interpreters tonight. So thank you all. Have a nice time. Take a little bit of a break, because this is all you're going to get.